You were born into a simulation, and like most people, you were never told the rules. But once you understand how the system actually works, you'll realize reality isn't fixed. It's programmable. And the moment you change your code, the game changes instantly. This isn't science fiction. It's the hidden architecture of the world you've been living in your entire life. A world that behaves not like a concrete physical structure, but like a responsive field of data. What you call reality isn't an objective environment. It's a projection, a rendering, a simulation responding to the commands you've been unconsciously feeding it since birth. That's why some people live lives of synchronicity, flow, and abundance, and others remain trapped in cycles that never seem to break. It's not luck, it's not chance, it's not even circumstance, it's code. Every simulation has rules. Today we will talk about the rules that govern perception, expectation, and identity. They determine what kind of reality gets rendered around you, what version of the world you wake up in tomorrow, what people appear in your life, what opportunities show up or never do. And those rules are shaped by one thing, your internal operating system. You've been interfacing with this system your entire life, whether you knew it or not. You were taught how to think, what to believe, how to feel, how to react. You were fed programs, not maliciously, but unconsciously, by parents, teachers, media, culture. And each of those programs wrote lines of code into your simulation. The problem is, most people never question the code. They think the simulation is the way it is, that life is hard, that things take time, that struggle is noble, that dreams are just fantasies. And because they accept those beliefs as facts, the simulation obliges. It renders a reality that matches the code. That's the first rule of the simulation. It doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you expect. And your expectations aren't intellectual, they're vibrational, emotional, subconscious. You might say you want love, freedom, or success, but if your emotional system is still looping scarcity, fear, or unworthiness, that's the code you're running. And that's the simulation you're waking up inside of every day. But here's the part that changes everything. The simulation isn't static. It doesn't run on fixed tracks. It's dynamic, adaptive. It updates in real time. Which means that the moment you change the internal code, not just mentally, but energetically, the simulation begins to shift. This is why some people seem to quantum leap. One year they're stuck, lost, repeating loops, and the next they're in a different world. Different outcomes, different people, different everything. It's not magic, it's reprogramming. The external shift is simply a delayed reflection of the internal update. Imagine reality like a video game. Your avatar, the you moving through life, is operating on default settings. Those settings determine how the world behaves around you. But there's a hidden console behind the game, a command center you weren't told about. And from that console, you can input new code, new expectations, new identity structures. And when you do, the game starts playing differently. But here's the trick. You can't fake it. The simulation isn't fooled by language. It doesn't care what you say. It reads your vibration. It renders what you are, not what you pretend to be. So if you say, "I'm wealthy," while vibrating in lack, the system renders lack. If you visualize success while holding the identity of someone who's frustrated, the simulation reflects frustration. That's not failure, that's precision. The system is loyal to your current code. But the moment you stop repeating the old loops, the moment you override them with new emotional inputs, new patterns of thought, new energetic signatures, the simulation has no choice but to update. Because it's not creating reality from scratch. It's selecting from infinite pre-existing timelines. Versions of reality already exist where you're wealthy, loved, healthy, powerful, and your access to them depends entirely on the code you're running now. That's the second rule of the simulation. It doesn't evolve linearly. It renders based on resonance. What you call change is actually a shift in selection. You didn't work your way into a better life. You tuned into a different file. This is why parallel realities matter. They're not abstract theories. They're the logical conclusion of a system that runs on infinite variables. Think of each possible life path as a different simulation file, a different rendering of you and your world. Every possible version of you already exists as a potential. You're not creating them, you're selecting them by aligning with the version you want. Most people stay in the same file because they don't change their input. They repeat the same emotions, the same choices, the same energetic patterns. And so they wake up inside the same rendered version of reality, different days, same simulation. But the simulation is not loyal to the past. It's loyal to the present signal. Which means the moment you shift, the moment your energy, emotion, and expectation change, the simulation begins rendering a different file. That's how fast it can happen. The lag between internal code and external reflection depends only on your consistency, not time, not effort, just coherence. You don't need to fix anything in your current reality. You don't need to solve every problem. You don't need to wait until everything makes sense. You only need to become aware of the code you're running and decide whether it's the code you want to keep. If you stop repeating, if you stop reinforcing the old version of you, the simulation starts to destabilize. The file begins to dissolve, and a new one takes its place. That's how people wake up one day and realize they no longer resonate with the friends, job, city, or identity they've carried for years. The old simulation begins to fade, not because something was lost, but because a new version was selected. That's the third rule of the simulation. Nothing is fixed. Everything is responsive. You were taught to think that life happens to you, that external events happen, and that affects your internal state. But it's the opposite. Your internal state shapes which version of life you experience. The simulation doesn't care about your past. It cares about your signal. Change the signal, and you change the system. So if you feel like life has been glitching, if you've been experiencing repeating patterns, strange synchronicities, or a growing sense that something isn't quite real, you're not broken. You're waking up. You're starting to notice the edges of the program. You're realizing the scenery isn't fixed. You're beginning to suspect that you have more influence than you were told. And you're right. You were never meant to be just a player in the simulation. You were meant to be a programmer. But first, you had to forget. You had to live as if the world was solid, absolute, outside of your control. That was part of the game. The veil of forgetting created contrast, and the contrast created desire. The desire to shift, to break the loop, to find the code. And now you have. So the only question is, what will you do with it? Will you keep running the same script, or will you begin to write a new one? The simulation is listening, the system is online, and the moment you decide to shift, it begins rendering the world that matches that decision. In the next segment, you'll learn how to do exactly that. You'll discover how to become the coder. How to input new beliefs, new identities, and new emotional signatures into the system. Not just through thought, but through coherent internal programming. Because this isn't about theory, it's about execution. Time to code something new. So now you know the truth. This isn't a static world. It's a simulation, responsive, intelligent, and constantly rendering your reality based on the internal code you're running. The question is no longer whether you can change your life. The question is, are you willing to take conscious control of the system that's been responding to you all along? You are the coder. And that power doesn't come from force, it comes from precision. Most people try to change their reality by taking action in the external world, thinking that if they move the pieces around, eventually the board will look different. But that's not how the system works. This isn't a mechanical universe. It's a reactive interface. It's not cause and effect. It's input and render. So if you want to shift the output, you don't start with effort. You start with code. The system doesn't care what you say you want. It responds to what you consistently broadcast through your internal state, your beliefs, your expectations, your identity, and your emotions. These are the command lines. They are the real code behind the simulation you call life. Let's start with belief. Belief is your operating system. It determines what you'll allow the simulation to render and what will be blocked before it even has a chance to load. If you believe that money is hard to come by, the simulation won't show you opportunities. Not because they don't exist, but because your code has filtered them out. If you believe love is dangerous, the simulation won't allow in healthy relationships, because you've programmed it to see connection as a threat. Belief acts as a filter, and the system is loyal to your filter. Now move to identity. Identity is the root command, the core code that governs every other line. If you see yourself as a struggler, as someone who's always just getting by, or as someone who never gets chosen, then even when life offers you something different, you'll unconsciously reject it. Because the code says, that's not for me. Then there's emotion, your frequency output. This is what confirms the code you're running. The simulation doesn't just respond to your conscious thoughts. It reads your emotional state as confirmation of what's real. So when you feel anxious about money while affirming wealth, the system responds to anxiety, not the words. When you feel unworthy while visualizing success, the system responds to unworthiness. The emotional signature is the confirmation signal. It tells the system, render this. So how do you hack the code? First, you observe it. You begin noticing the inner dialogue, the emotional patterns, the automatic assumptions that run your life. You don't try to override them immediately. You study them. You treat your consciousness like a terminal screen. What lines are running in the background? What beliefs are hidden in your reactions? What identity is being rehearsed every time you speak? Then you rewrite, not by force, but by coherence. You begin introducing new inputs. You ask, what would the version of me who already lives in the reality I desire believe about themselves? What emotions would they feel on a regular basis? What expectations would they hold without even thinking? And then, and this is key, you begin acting as if those inputs are true, not pretending, embodying. Because embodiment is the code that tells the simulation this is the new program. If you want to shift to the version of you who's abundant, start making decisions as if abundance is the default, not recklessness, but aligned confidence. If you want to shift into love, begin communicating like someone who expects to be cherished. If you want to access ease, begin regulating your nervous system as if rest is safe. Each decision you make from the new frequency is a line of code. Each pattern you interrupt is a deleted command. Each moment of coherence is a system update. And here's the magic. The simulation doesn't wait to see if you deserve it. It doesn't analyze your past. It simply responds to your current input. The moment you shift your inner code, the simulation begins re-rendering. You may not see it instantly. There might be a delay between input and output, not because the system is resisting, but because you're still stabilizing the signal. Remember, the system doesn't respond to one-off commands. It responds to the dominant frequency. So consistency is the key. This is why people say reality tests them. It's not testing you, it's checking whether the new input is stable or just a glitch. The moment you stop defaulting to the old program and start holding the new code, even under pressure, the system begins to reflect that back. That's when the new people show up, the new opportunities, the impossible breakthroughs. Not because you earned them, but because you matched them. You're not trying to convince the simulation to give you a better life. You're proving through energy, choice, and emotion that you've already become the version of you who lives it. And the simulation, always loyal, always precise, responds by loading the file that matches your command. So write clearly, write consistently, write with integrity. You are the coder, and the simulation is already listening. In the final segment, we'll explore why most people keep looping inside outdated versions of reality, and how you can stay stabilized inside the new code long enough for the shift to fully render. Because knowing how to hack the system is only step one. The real work is learning how to stop sabotaging the shift after it starts. The next level of mastery is staying coded in your truth, even when the simulation tries to lure you back to the old file. And that's what we'll decode next. By now, you understand the truth. Reality isn't fixed, it's coded. You don't manifest your life through effort alone. You shape it through the code you're running underneath everything you say and do. And once you begin to change that code, the simulation starts responding. But here's the catch, and this is where most people glitch. They start the shift, they get the download, they even feel the energy of the new code beginning to take root. But then, they snap back. Not because they're broken, not because the code didn't work, but because they never stabilized the shift. They thought installing the new program once was enough. But the simulation doesn't respond to a single command. It reads the dominant frequency, and the moment you default to the old code, the system reloads the old file. Why does this happen? Because the old code doesn't just disappear, it fights back. Think of it like a virus, a background process from a previous program that keeps trying to reinstall itself. Every time you get close to stabilizing the new system, the virus activates, whispering old doubts, reintroducing past identities, pulling in emotional signatures that no longer belong to your current timeline. The virus shows up as guilt when you start feeling worthy. It shows up as hesitation when you finally step into confidence. It appears in the voices of others, family, culture, society, urging you to be careful, to be realistic, to stay who you were. It's not malicious, it's protective, but it's outdated. And if you don't recognize it for what it is, just an old script, a corrupted line of code, you'll let it overwrite the new frequency you're trying to stabilize. That's why so many people loop. They wake up to the truth, they apply it for a few days, maybe a week, and then life pulls them back. The rent is due, the relationship triggers them, and without realizing it, they rerun the old identity, the struggler, the doubter, the one who isn't ready yet. It's not failure, it's just a feedback loop, and the simulation is loyal to feedback. So if you want to truly rewrite the program, not just temporarily but permanently, you have to stop downloading corrupted code. You have to stop rehearsing beliefs that were never yours to begin with. You have to stop giving your power away to the parts of the simulation that reflect who you used to be. This is why the final key isn't learning more. It's deleting. Deleting the narratives you inherited from a wounded world. Deleting the programs you absorbed from family, school, culture. Deleting the expectation that things must be hard, linear, or slow. Because those beliefs aren't neutral. They're active code. Every time you agree with them, even silently, you reauthorize the simulation to keep running the same file. And that's the glitch. Most people don't realize they're the ones feeding the system its instructions. You weren't born with the belief that success requires struggle. That came from people who never saw another way. You weren't born thinking you're not worthy of love. That came from someone else's pain. You weren't born believing you can't trust your intuition. That was taught to you by systems that fear self-trust. But if you don't consciously uninstall those beliefs, they keep operating in the background. Like a stealth virus, rewriting your progress as soon as you turn your attention away. And they don't just limit what you think, they limit what the simulation can render. It's like trying to run new software on an outdated system. No matter how powerful your vision is, if the base code says this isn't safe, this isn't possible, or this isn't for people like me, the shift will collapse. So here's what most people miss. The biggest obstacle isn't the simulation, it's your loyalty to the old code. And loyalty doesn't always look like fear or self-sabotage. Sometimes it looks like comfort, familiarity, being realistic. Sometimes it shows up as a subtle reluctance to let go of the identity you've lived in for so long, even if it's painful, because at least you know how to survive inside it. But surviving isn't the same as coding. Survival is reactive. Coding is intentional. So if you want to stay in the new simulation, if you want the reality you glimpse to become permanent, you have to stop negotiating with the version of you that doesn't belong there. That means not feeding the old file with your attention, your words, or your emotion. That means noticing when the system tests you and holding your frequency steady instead of interpreting every delay as a denial. That means being willing to be misunderstood, outgrown, or unrecognizable to people still playing the old game. And most of all, it means anchoring the shift with action. Because the system responds to movement. You don't stabilize the new code through thinking alone. You do it by choosing from it. Choosing to respond like someone who already knows they're supported. Choosing to walk like someone who already trusts their vision. Choosing to speak like someone who's already been chosen by the life they're building. Each choice is a command. Each command rewrites the system. And eventually, with enough repetition, with enough integrity, the new file stabilizes. You wake up one day and realize you don't resonate with fear the same way. You don't collapse under pressure. You don't need to prove yourself or rehearse your worth. You've stopped trying to earn the simulation's permission and started giving yourself full access. That's when the outer world starts to shift in ways that seem surreal. But it's not surreal. It's synced. You've become someone who doesn't just know the simulation is programmable. You're programming it in real time. And that's the level most people never reach, not because they can't, but because they're not willing to hold the signal long enough to break the loop. So if you've come this far, understand this. The simulation you were born into wasn't built to trap you. It was built to wake you up. Every loop you've lived was data. Every breakdown was a redirect. Every glitch was a signal. And now the system is waiting for your next input. So what will it be? Will you let this be another temporary spike of inspiration that fades as soon as life gets loud again? Or will you anchor what you know and begin living like the programmer you've always been? If you're seeing this video, it's not an accident, it's a programmatic reflection. It means the simulation already recognizes your frequency. It means you've already started to destabilize the old file. Otherwise, you wouldn't even be able to hear this message. So don't retreat. Don't reboot into the past. Don't run the old script just because it's easier. Stay with the new code. Hold the new vibration. Speak the new language. Because if you do, and only if you do, the simulation will shift.